Welcome to the Dance Science Podcast. I'm your host, the Dance Scientist, and the Dance Science Podcast intends to build connections and drive discussion on how we can improve our field and make dance science more normalized. Thank you for being here, and please enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited for today's episode. I'm your host, the Dance Scientist, and today is episode number 30, which is amazing because I've only been doing this for a year, and I feel like 30 episodes is pretty good for our first year. So today we're going to be having our guest speaker. Her name is Veronica Pryor, and she's a dance PT. So first, I just want to say thank you to Veronica for taking time out of her day and being here with us today.
Of course, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, this is going to be great. So first, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, towards becoming a dance PT and, what led you to doing that and taking on that career?
Absolutely. So I grew up as a competitive studio dancer and continued dancing throughout college. However, I noticed in my early 20s, I started having hip pain, and that's not normal for someone in their early 20s. So it kind of led me down a path of, movement education. So I sought out fitness certificates. I became a fully comprehensive certified Pilates instructor twice over. And that kind of led me, to train my students in a way that I didn't feel like I was trained. However, I was only seeing mild results, if you will, and things that I didn't quite understand why they were still happening. And that led me down the path of physical therapy. I just graduated last year from Wayne State's physical therapy program and been working on, getting some more dance and sports education along the way.
I see. So do you mainly work with dancers now, or is it kind of a mix?
I have a mixture. Part of my education was doing a rotation at the University of Michigan Medsport with their performing arts specialist, Kristen Guyton. So she's my mentor, and every time that I do get a dancer, and if I have questions, I reach out to her. And I actually just accepted a sports residency program as a physical therapist, and I'll be getting that in January.
Oh my gosh, this is perfect timing then. Awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of see this contributing to the big picture of progressing just dance and dance science in general?
I believe that as educators in the field, we really need to do a little bit more outreach in terms of cross-training and training hours. Research has shown that more is not necessarily better. So the more hours they're in the studio does not mean they're going to get better. In fact, it increases their risk of injury. And so I do believe that one of my passions is, building a relationship in strength and power training for dancers rather than, their typical mobility training with Pilates and core stability with Pilates and yoga and things of that nature.
Yes. And, I'm obviously on board with everything that you said here because it's something that I also preach as well. And so this question kind of comes up when I'm talking to dance PTs is how do you kind of go about when you have teachers or studio owners who are just too resistant and are just not really willing to have their door like open, as I like to call it sometimes, since we know dance is so tradition based?
That's a great question. I'm lucky enough to be in a studio setting right now as a dance educator where the owner trusts me enough to kind of mix it up a little bit, although there was some pushback in the beginning. And so with her, I had a personal relationship with her, so it was a little easier for me to persuade her, if you will, to see what I was trying to do with my methods of teaching. In the community, though, I think that building like what you are doing, I think is amazing, is building up these evidence-based, easy to digest materials that, the studio owners can maybe see like, hey, okay, being in the studio 25 hours a week, I guess, really isn't doing what we want it to do.
Right.
And then I think building up some relationships in the strength and conditioning community is something that I would like to do over the next year, to have somewhere to refer my dancers to.
I see. So did you start with like small changes in that specific studio, or did you kind of like give it all to them at once? I'm just curious.
Great question. Yeah. Yeah, I started with small changes actually. So what I currently teach is conditioning and technique. And so I would start by adding a little more plyometric training and conditioning, or, increasing the amount of weight in terms of doing squats and things like that. And then over time, I started to build a relationship between my conditioning class and my technique classes, that those, for motor learning purposes, those ideas can be carried over to their actual dance practice.
And then I'm curious too, because you were mentioning like increasing the weights and the loads. So like, how do you go about when female dancers are apprehensive? They don't want to bulk up, is like one of the main myths. How do you go about like getting through to them that that's not going to happen?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I do is I teach them the difference between flexibility and strength. Now, they can do the splits, right? But can they keep their leg up in développé for as long as they want? No. So flexibility is not the problem, strength is. And so from there, I start to build kind of a rapport, and they start to trust a little bit more in the process. So I don't just give them, 15 pounds right away.
Yeah.
But once they start to see and feel the results, then I can start to increase the load more, because it is such a prominent myth in dance. And I wish, there was more that we could do to kind of break that myth.
Yeah. But I like that you're taking it in small chunks for them and not like a huge wave. Yeah. Yeah. That can be shocking to them. Yeah. And, another thing that came up is, what's the age group? I'm curious too. Is this like adolescent?
Go ahead, sorry.
Is it adolescent is what I was thinking, or no, a little bit older?
It's adolescent to teenage. So I want to say maybe from 12 to 18 in my classes.
Okay. So that's it's good that, and obviously it's good that you're doing weights with them, because that's one of my biggest things, is getting young dancers to start weight training. Yeah.
They need it.
They need it. Not when they're 14, right? I think that there's a lot we can do from a young age in a safe way. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. To give them a good foundation. So this kind of piggybacks into our next question. What advice would you give a student interested in pursuing your field as a PT?
So some of the advice that I would do is definitely do some shadowing. I was lucky enough to shadow in a center that had more athletic science and athletes, which is what I knew I was interested in, given the fact that I trained dancers at the time. Do some really good shadowing. Ask realistic questions. The journey is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it is worth it. And it's very rewarding. And so if anyone that's listening to this has any questions, I would love to, answer those for them, and maybe guide them along the way. So I'm a good resource. If they need anything, my mentor, Kristen Skyton at U of M, is a great resource.
It's awesome. Thank you for offering
lots
that.
Lots of other dance PTs out there. Shout out Kristen Abbey.
Yeah. So that's awesome that you're offering that guidance. That's awesome. Yeah. So what have you learned that you wish you knew as a young dancer? This is probably people's favorite question. It's like we could write a book.
We could definitely write a book. So what I'm teaching my dancers is the difference between strength and flexibility, the difference between a dynamic warm-up versus stretching for your warm-up, the importance of cross-training outside of dance. I get it. dance is a huge commitment. I get that you're in school, you have that, that commitment, but there are always ways to make sure that you can cross train. And I've tried to put that together for my dancers, create like a schedule, like to show them that if you really want this, there is time to do it.
And you're mentioning that you're like teaching your dancers as well, right? So something that came up for me is I think a lot of times there's an assumption that it's like when I say dancers need to be taught anatomy, I think there's a common misconception that people think like I mean like a sit down lecture, right? So can you kind of go into like how you're teaching the dancers, but not in a way it's obviously not boring. It's obviously not taking time out of class. You're doing it in a way that's helping them, but not, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. I do.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes with the thing that I was speaking on earlier of creating a theme and then carrying that theme over to ballet technique. So I may focus on one body part more than others in conditioning, not necessarily only that body part, and then be like in the next technique class, draw attention to that area in terms of its anatomy, how it works, and how it would work in dance and their technique. So that I actually do take time to actually get every single person to feel what I want them to feel, which does take time out of class, but I feel like it's very important for motor learning. So I do that.
And that's evidence that you can teach anatomy without a sit down lecture. And like you were saying, it might have to take some time out of class, but maybe some weeks it doesn't have to take so much time out of class, right? Because each week is going to layer on top of each other. So yeah, I think that's really good proof. And it can be fun for them, it doesn't have to be. Because I also like to say I don't think it should be boring when they're learning anatomy.
I agree. No, it shouldn't. And I do have I don't remember the name of the app, but I do have one of those anatomy apps.
Visible Body?
Show them the muscle. Yes.
Yeah.
Visible Body, where they can see the muscles, see the bones, see how, like, cause they didn't even know what their hip looks like, right? And where their hip is actually located. So, having those visuals is also really important in conjunction with the classes themselves.
Yeah. So that's just proof that it can be fun and it can be simple and it can cost you basically nothing, right?
Exactly.
Teaching the anatomy lesson. Yeah. Awesome. So where can people learn more about you and where can they access your resources? Again, we're going to get into this a little bit more in part 2, but if you can just kind of give us a little taste.
So you can find me on Instagram, either at Veronica Pryor or at Veronica Pryor_DPT. I've been really bad about updating that one, but I do have some dance content on there from a training and physical therapy perspective. I'm also going to be at NDEO in February at Oakland University, giving a talk with Kristen Skyton on warm-up and cool-down for dance education.
Awesome. So yeah, like I said, I will get all of Veronica's info and I will post it all onto my podcast page as well. So there'll be direct links for you guys. And then, as a wrap up into part 1, if you just had to give one little tidbit of wisdom and kind of like shrink it down from what we've been talking about, what would that be?
So especially for those girls in dance that love it so much, but know that, it might not be their career path, know that things may not turn out the way you imagine, but they turn out the way they're supposed to. I wanted to be a rockette. Spoiler alert, I'm way too short. But now that I've dedicated myself to dance research and dance treatment, like I am well within the dance community and I have a dance profession that I love. It's not that I'm a professional dancer, but I get to do what I love, and that's help dancers feel their best.
Right.
So if you want to be a professional dancer, you might not, but you can always have a career in dance.
Yeah. So you're fulfilling yourself in other ways so that dance is still a part of your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for part 1, everyone. All right, welcome back to part 2, everyone. And now we're getting a little bit more specific into what Veronica does as a dance PT. So first, again, she's going to get a little bit more specific into what she does as a dance PT. Thank you.
All right. So, as a physical therapist that specializes in dance medicine, I basically will see a dancer for an evaluation, which includes a detailed look at strength, range of motion, flexibility, and motor control, most importantly. I think that's something in dance that is missing from a lot of screening is what is their control like in functional activity for them. Then from there, I create a plan of care that includes either manual treatment if it's necessary, stability treatment, strength training throughout the entire range of motion, which I believe is something that maybe going to a traditional PT might not get a dancer because they don't understand the demands of the sport. And I do call it a sport. I believe that dancers are artistic athletes.
Yes. And so, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off if you were going to say a little bit more. Yeah. But I was going to say too, can you go into why it's important for dancers to see a dance PT? Because this is also something that I believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a dancer, former dancer, and dance educator, I can tell what a dancer needs from a performance perspective, but I can also tell what a dancer needs from a physical therapy perspective. So they're going to get both within reason. So no, I am not going to make it so that you can do a full back bend,
in a day.
Because you don't, in a day, right? But I will make sure that you get the range of motion that you need, but more importantly, the strength that you need to support that range of motion.
And we sorry, I was just kind of but I was going to say too is like dancers use like a very specific language too that a traditional PT might not know, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so important. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. So the language is important, I think. Because then I think if dancers just see like a traditional PT and they're kind of, they're trying to explain what their experience is, I think it can maybe get miscommunicated or misconstrued. Yeah.
100%.
So I do think there's a lot of benefits for dancers to see a dance PT.
Agreed.
So now can you tell us a little bit more specifically about the services that you offer? So you were kind of mentioning like the screening part and then the plan of care, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that would be considered traditional physical therapy treatment, where we do an evaluation, treatments, plan of care, and then a program for the dancer to continue after traditional physical therapy has ended. Okay. Now, because I wear a lot of different hats, I also see dancers for Pilates. I also work on strength and conditioning with dancers. And then, of course, I'm also in the dance classroom. So if anyone has questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Well, that's awesome. So you're circulating in a lot of different environments.
Yeah.
I like that. So can you tell us a little bit about what some of your challenges are? So I think this will be interesting.
Yeah. So from a physical therapist perspective, but also being a dance educator in the dance classroom, it can be very challenging to communicate things that I believe may not benefit the dancer in the long run in terms of their performance. So, for example, they're like, I used to be able to do an oversplit, but now my hip hurts really bad. And from my healthcare background, I want to help the hip pain, but I don't necessarily want to get them back to that oversplit.
Yeah. So what do you do in a situation like that?
I educate as much as I can. I actually had a conversation with a dancer the other night about this exact same thing, and my rationale for them was, what in dance do you do that is exactly an oversplit?
Nothing.
It has no functional applicability to what you do as a dancer. Okay? It just means that gravity has allowed you to stretch even more. Great. But can you use that? No. You're not able to show me that against gravity. So you don't need that at this point. What you need is this X, Y, and Z.
I think a lot of the times too, especially with young dancers, with their brain capacity, I think it's hard for them to think like long term, that there's actually exactly, they're going to be long term health consequences as well, not necessarily just short term. And even if they get the oversplits, for example, again, they can't really imagine like, wait, 60 years from now, what are my hips going to feel like? So I think it's up to us. And especially with social media, they're constantly seeing, every every harmful thing as they're scrolling social media.
Absolutely.
So
And so what I try to do is not talk to them about it from an injury perspective, because they do have a hard time imagining that.
Yeah.
But what I do try to do, like I was saying earlier, is explain it from how is it going to help you right now, and from a functional standpoint, because they can see that.
Right.
They're like, well, you know what? It doesn't apply to my bottomas, because gravity is not getting my bottom up.
And that raises another question for me is, I know of studios who have like requirements for like flexibility that they really push for their dancers. So how do you kind of go about when it's part of the culture in a studio and then there's like not much you can do?
Yeah, I just educate the dancer the best that I can if they're in the clinic on, I understand the demands that they're being pushed for, but here's what my demands for you would be. And if you need me to speak with, your dance educator, I can totally do that. I keep the lines of communication open so that, I can educate, the staff on this dancer and why I don't think that's a good idea for them.
And so you have done this before with teachers?
Yes.
Oh, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Because sometimes they're also, again, they're pushing some of these harmful practices. Dancers aren't just getting it from anywhere. It's coming from a line of command. Yeah. Awesome. So what's your favorite part of being a dance PT?
I kind of, mentioned this a little bit in part one, but it's just like being able to be in the field that I love, and helping dancers feel their best. I've always loved to dance, even though, there are things that I would like to make better about it. But it's like a dream come true, like being able to be on this podcast, being able to present at IADAMS, NDEO, like it's a dream come true that I get to work with my favorite field, and, be involved in it as well.
And I was also wondering too, do you mostly use your PT as like when someone is already injured, or also more as like a prehab stuff?
That is such a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. So I actually do offer, or at the facility that I'm currently at during the residency, it might be a little different, but I offer injury prevention physical therapy. And so I have had a couple of dancers do it. And, it involves a lot more weight training, and, pre-manual kind of things versus, what injury would look like from a physical therapy perspective. So thank you for bringing that up.
So you do offer both. So that's, I think that's nice.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that's another misconception with PT is that it's just about like when you get injured, but there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot of like pre-work that people can do. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I have people that see me weekly for injury prevention.
Yeah. Because that just shows how much they think it's of value to them as well. Right. If they're coming weekly.
Yeah.
Like go them.
Exactly. I love it.
I love that.
Love the dedication.
So what is one piece of wisdom that you've kind of learned from being a dance PT that you would like to offer our audience today?
So one piece of wisdom that I can offer is to the dancers. I know that time and resources are a commitment, but you have to invest in yourself for longevity, especially if being a professional is part of your career path. So find the PT, see them for, training once a month even. It doesn't have to be once a week. And really put that time and energy to invest in yourself outside of the dance classroom. I know choreography demands are huge, but you can practice choreography without doing choreography.
Right.
You can visualize. So, things like that. Just really invest in yourself. It's super important for longevity of your career or just longevity of you.
As a human, yeah. Because I think there's, I mention a lot with like the negatives of social media, but I also think that there's a lot of positives with social media and a lot of great resources on there, like trusted Instagram accounts that you can follow, trusted people that you can follow and you can listen to because you know that they're coming from like an evidence standpoint. So I do think there's a lot of good resources. Yeah.
Just like your content.
Oh,
I love it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. All right, wrapping up today's wonderful episode with Veronica Pryor, who is a dance physical therapist. So, again, just quickly summarizing some of the main points that we touched on today. So, one of the things that she talks about is it's important for dancers to be investing in themselves. Okay, remember, there are really so many amazing resources out there right now for dancers to be using. And, it really should be viewed as putting in the time and the work and the effort now, because remember, those are going to have long-term implications for their career longevity, and they're also going to have implications for just their lives as a human being. Okay, so it's important that we're teaching our dancers the importance of investing in themselves, right? And that can be in a variety of different ways. Next, she gave some wonderful advice for students interested in becoming a dance physical therapist, and also her advice for aspiring professional dancers. She also talked about how she applies her knowledge also as a dance educator at a studio. So, again, I do think that that's really, really important in the work that she does, even as a physical therapist, because she's kind of seeing how different environments in dance operate, and she's really able to have a little bit of an even greater impact by also teaching in a dance studio. So I just think that's really awesome because I know that she's having a lot of positive change in those studios that she teaches in. Again, she also touched on that she offers PT both for injury and for injury prevention. And that's something that she really wanted to make clear today. And then we also touched on, one of the most popular talks right now, this is really like a hot topic right now, is dancing harder doesn't necessarily mean dancing smarter. And so again, we really have to look into our dancers' schedules, before the year begins and just kind of assess, how can our dancers have a better year without them necessarily dancing more, right? Because more isn't necessarily always better. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the Dance Science Podcast. I'm your host, the Dance Scientist, and if you really enjoyed today's conversation, please feel free to either leave a review. You can also comment right on the episode, and you can also send me a direct message right on Instagram. Thank you for being here with me today, and I look forward to seeing you in my next episode.